Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and all you lovely people out there. Whether you're listening from the wasteland or from the best little town on the bottom of the deep blue sea, this is Fallout Rapture. So today, folks, I just wanted to do a video on some of my thoughts on the upcoming Resident Evil Requiem. Initially, this video was supposed to be a lot longer, going into potential plot points, structuring of the game, potential characters, and even lore concerns. But then I saw an announcement that Capcom might be showing new footage at their Spotlight event on June 26th, and well... the best laid plans, folks, am I right? So due to time constraints, I ended up cutting down the video into just who I think will be featured in the game, for what reasons, and vice versa for who will not. A simple, easy video to get published before my day job drags me back in. Before we begin, a quick warning that there will be spoilers for different points over the entire RE series in here, so just a heads up. Now, without further ado, let's get into it.
So I'll get help and come back, right? Looks like it's a race against time.
So right out of the bat, I say one of the people who's most likely going to appear alongside Grace in Requiem is definitely going to be Leon S. Kennedy. Yep, I said people, but I'll get into that point a bit later. But getting back into it, comparing Leon to the other main protagonists and side characters of the series, I think he has the biggest connection to Raccoon City of all of them. Not only was this the starting line for his whole journey, but I think he has one of the biggest reasons to go back to the city and see the truth of Raccoon City be exposed. That being guilt. A quick side note for those on the know, Requiem's official website that I'll link in the description updated a while back and states that the main point of the story will be exposing the hidden truth behind Raccoon City's outbreak, which I believe will be finally revealing the US's part in covering up the fact that Raccoon City was a zombie/BOW event for the last 28 years if this game does take place in 2026. The reason why they did that is because they were Umbrella's clients, and had it gotten out that there was a virus/BOWs and people began looking into that, it might have revealed that the US was involved and caused them to be condemned by the rest of the world and lose their global superpower status. And this was all stuff that was talked about / a lot of people learned about in Leon's RE6 campaign. Now, how that story beat links up to Leon's guild, I think is kind of quite obvious when you look at it. Leon was the rookie cop who never was. This was supposed to be his town, his city. These were supposed to be the people he protected, the co-workers he worked alongside. And so you have that base guilt and regret already for him not being able to do that. But then you add to the fact that he was forced to join the government and essentially help cover up the real truth behind everyone's stuff in Raccoon City. You know, it definitely weighs on him. Leon couldn't save them, and then he perpetuates the lie to the world about what truly happens in the city. I mean, he didn't have a choice in the matter, but rarely when we feel guilty about something do we think clearly about it. I think it also doesn't help that after 28 years, how many outbreaks he's been involved in, that in a lot of them, at least the ones he's been involved in, the US has somehow tried to play an angle in that incident that strengthens their own relations or tries to gain power, or were involved in creating the incident in the first place. So I think Leon's guilt and him becoming jaded and disillusioned with everything has grown exponentially over the years, especially given what we saw was happening to him in Vendetta that took place 12 years earlier.
I keep fighting, and fighting, and fighting. And instead of seeing an end to this shit, it just keeps getting worse. Is this what my life's supposed to be? Fighting the living dead and the bastards that make them? What's the point of it all? So you got an arms dealer on one side, and on the other, the government dropping bombs on weddings. Who's the bad guy here?
And going back to Raccoon City, where that guilt spawned from, where he first got involved in the US government and had to start lying, covering things up for the good old USA, it's going to be a gut punch for him. I also think having Leon as a side character in this game will not only give us an interesting dynamic with Grace, but also allow us to explore more of Leon's character And the main reason that is because you're not in control of Leon for this one. In fact, I think this might be the first canon game that you have him as a true side character. And that means the writing for him is not going to be focusing on gameplay, writing reactions to things that the players will encounter or do when controlling him, because that's Grace's role in the story. So anytime we interact with Leon, the writing is going to be more for him compared to the game, if that makes sense. I think a big reason also to bring him back is because of that interaction slash dynamic he's going to have with Grace. Grace is a newbie. If he's talking about the past, he might have to go more in length about things because Grace doesn't have a reference point or is used to certain things, unlike other veteran characters that Leon would normally encounter in these situations. And Grace can ask questions that other veteran characters wouldn't. Like, this game allows us to have Leon describe, in his own words, how Leon Kennedy got to this point in his life. All the other vets know this story. He doesn't have to explain it to them, but he does with Grace. And I think it'll be the first time in a while where he's had to put a voice to what he's been through, and that is just going to be very interesting. So overall, I feel like this game presents a real cool way to start, wrapping up Leon's character, with him finally seeing Raccoon City and the truth behind it being revealed and put to rest, and just as a way to explore more of his character. The second person who I think would be in Requiem and could potentially be the third member of this trio situation that's currently being suggested in rumors about Requiem would be Kevin Ryman of the Outbreak series. Like, looking at me in general and also the recent rumors, I feel like a trio group would be interesting and work very well with this entry, especially with some of the interesting dynamics that could come from having Kevin in particular come back. Along with the fact that out of all the Outbreak characters, I feel like Kevin makes the most sense to come back. Not only is Kevin kind of the main poster character for the Outbreak series, or at least from what I've seen, but looking at the Outbreak cast as a whole, a lot of them I feel like by the end of File 2, if they are still alive, have settled down, or their personality wouldn't suggest that they would throw themselves back into a dangerous situation like Raccoon City. Other members of the cast are more on the sidelines, like in the medical areas, like Rebecca, and then there is wherever the heck David Kane is. Kevin, meanwhile, is the former cop. He's the former combatant, so I think he would be the most useful in this situation, since he can at least hold his own. But the main reason for me why Kevin would be the one to come back is I think he would have some interesting dynamics, not only between him and Grace, because he knew Alyssa during the Outbreak games, but also between him and Leon. What I'm considering here is not only the fact that Kevin was an RPD cop, so Leon's finally meeting one of the co-workers that never was, but in the English localization of Resident Evil Outbreak, it's suggested by a collectible that you can pick up called football tickets that Leon and Kevin possibly knew each other and possibly were friends. So that could be interesting to make it canon in this game, and what that would bring to the dynamics between these two, especially considering what Kevin has been up to, or more to the point, what he has not been up to. At the end of Outbreak File 2, Kevin walked away from bioweapons. He moved out to Miami, Florida, and I don't know if he was still a cop by the end of that game, much less by the time of Re9. However, I'm fairly certain he hasn't been involved in any more outbreaks, and that could add to the dynamic between him and Leon. Kevin's the cop who walked away from everything. Meanwhile, Leon is the rookie cop who stayed and got involved with the government and finding bioweapons, and sort of like how their different experiences over these past decades play against each other, especially if this is their reunion as like friends who have not seen each other in decades. Along with this, I think there could be some cool moments where Kevin's the one leading both Grace and Leon through Raccoon City, because Grace has never been here before, and Leon never got a chance to fully learn the layout of the city. I could just imagine moments of Kevin pointing out buildings or recalling people he knew who lived there, and it being both a bit nostalgic, but also underlined with a bit of sadness, which I think would perfectly fit with the game's title and particularly what this game seems to be leading up to, that being the Requiem for Raccoon City finally being sung. Also take it a step further and say that these three could represent different people's reactions to death. Kevin's the one who remembers the happiness and joy brought by those who are gone, the positives. Leon's the one who regrets and feels angry that somebody has passed on, and Grace is the person listening and learning about these stories of people who have long since passed on, which I feel like could be a very, very interesting dynamic. However, if I had to elect another member of Outbreak to come back instead of Kevin, I would say Yoko Suzuki would be my second choice. The main reason being her role as an umbrella scientist who voluntarily had her memories wiped after an incident she witnessed before the outbreak could unfortunately be worked into a possible hidden truth in Raccoon City that the developers are hinting about on the website if they don't go for the government route. Plus, there's also the bad end scene that she shares with Alyssa at the end of Outbreak if both of them aren't cured by the end of the final scenario, which I think Capcom could spin into a friendship that started during the outbreak and maybe lasted a little while longer that she could tell Grace about. Okay, so with the people who I think are gonna be in the game out of the way, I'm now gonna go down the list of people who I think are not gonna be in the game, and list the reasons why. Starting off with a strong contender given Leon's possible inclusion in this game and the location of the game, I do have my reasons why she probably won't be in it. Claire Redfield. Now, Claire definitely has a connection to Raccoon City, but it's not as strong as Leon's or some of the other characters I'll mention on this list. She was in Raccoon City during the outbreak, but it was not because she had a job there or a friend there or because it was her home, at least as far as I know of. It was to find Chris. So that connection to Raccoon City isn't as strong or as personal as Leon or some of the other characters I've mentioned, or will mention. I think there's also the fact that after Code Veronica, the way Claire has become involved in these outbreaks is usually through her humanitarian work. And unfortunately, with the plot of Requiem as it is right now, I don't really see that angle coming into play that would allow Claire to have a reason, to be in Raccoon City. So unfortunately, for those reasons, I don't see Claire being in this game. Next up is Jill Valentine. Now, the reason I don't think Jill is going to be in this game is something that I'm actually going to bring up with Chris. And that is the main fact that I don't think Raccoon City was as personal / a big experience for her as compared to someone like Leon. I mean, she definitely lived in Raccoon City and worked there, but the event that kicked off her fight against bioweapons was the Spencer Mansion incident. And following on that point, the games that she has appeared in are mainly focused around or lead into her fight with Umbrella one way or another, which I feel like has already been mostly wrapped up by this point in the game series. Spencer has been dealt with along with Wesker, and even considering the possibility that the hidden truth in Raccoon City might be Umbrella related, the game gives me a much more hidden truth / conspiracy theory vibe, which I think fits much more with Leon's characteristics and wheelhouse rather than Jill's. I also think, especially if we're going to use the remake version of Jill, I think there's the question of, how much did Raccoon City affect her? I mean, some lines in the remake make it feel like Jill is more willing to leave Raccoon City behind and has made sort of a peace with it at the end of Resident Evil 3 remake. Unlike, I think, with the originals and such, even with the quick internal monologue that's tagged on at the end. And I know there are rumors that Spencer will somehow revive himself and be the main villain of this game, and I think my eyes would roll so far into the back of my skull that they would get stuck if that happened. So for those reasons, I don't think Jill is going to be showing up in this game. And speaking of 3 remake, let's move on to Carlos Oliveira. Now, with Carlos, the main reasons I don't see him coming back is that he doesn't really have a true connection to Raccoon City. He was there as a mercenary doing a job, so he doesn't really have a personal connection to Raccoon City. And I don't know if that's strong enough, the fact that he was there during the outbreak to pull him back into the city all these years later. I feel like if Jill was there, he would have much more, like a plausible reason for coming back to Raccoon City. But by himself, I don't see him showing up. Now, Ada Wong is someone who I also don't think is going to show up, and some people might scratch their heads at that, but I have my reasons. A lot of people are saying if Leon shows up in this game, she's gonna show up too, and there's the fact that Ada was first introduced in RE2. She has that connection to Raccoon City via the outbreak, but I don't know. One, her connection is kind of Carlos level in that she was there for a job. And two, the theme of Requiem, as I've sort of been seeing in the trailers and such, I don't think really aligns with Ada. When Ada shows up in the games or in the movies, there's usually a spy/clandestine cloak and dagger theme to the game, or at least her story in it. And with Requiem, I think it's less about uncovering hidden secrets via espionage and more uncovering secrets from the past and putting things to rest, which I don't know necessarily fits with Ada. I think I would see a much higher chance of Ada being in this game if she had previous roles that put her in different situations that weren't spy work. For example, I think had she been given her role of supporting Ethan in Resident Evil Village that got cut, and had it been themed like anti-hero / more of her own personal reasons for being there, I could see her showing up in this game. But as it is currently with Requiem, I'm not certain about her, showing up. Finally, let's talk about the other half of the duo that started it all, Chris Redfield, and the reasons why I don't think he's going to be showing up in this game. One of the biggest reasons right off the bat that I can think of is that Chris is so far removed from the story of Raccoon City, or at least its destruction. Chris had long since left town before the outbreak. He wasn't involved in the destruction whatsoever. And the closest thing he has to a connection to the incident would be through Claire or Jill. But he didn't experience anything himself. And just like I said with Jill, his introduction to the world of the outbreaks and bioweapons was through the Spencer Manson incident. So it's more umbrella with him, and that's reflected in his games. Along with this, he has a storyline waiting for him that could potentially be like the former Umbrella executive who's running the connections could be secretly corrupting the BSA or something like that. Like, he has his own story waiting for him in the wings, so I don't think he needs to be here. Another thing I think is that there's almost been like this oversaturation of Chris Redfield in the new line of remakes and games that have come out. He's been in Seven, he's been in Village, he's been in both the new CGI movies, Vendetta and Death Island. And there is a potential point where fans could be like, we've seen too much of him recently, can we bring in somebody else? So that's why I don't think we're going to be seeing Chris in this game. So that was the last person on my list, but before I go, I kind of wanted to bring up like an interesting plot point / almost character moment that I think we could, see with Grace Ashcroft, our main lead. And that is, I'm wondering if her and Alyssa, had a bad relationship before she died. And what I mean by this is that I talked about how, the United States government covered up Raccoon City following the outbreak and its destruction in order to, keep itself safe. And that also meant, covering up any information on BOWs or anything related to the troops so it didn't come back to the United States government. Which happens to include, I believe, a newspaper article that Alyssa wrote after the end of Outbreak that we see in her ending in File 2. And I'm wondering, did Alyssa try to push for the truth to come out, that she knew the truth about Raccoon City, that she was angry at the government, or thought the truth deserved to be out there and kept pushing and trying to, get proof or reveal the truth to the world or get people to believe her. And just over time, people just started treating her like a conspiracy theorist or a nut job. And, how that impacted Grace growing up, because not only is she the daughter of a Raccoon City survivor, one of the few that are out there, but there's, like, your mom is, like, sounding like this crazy nut job conspiracy theorist. And the reason why I believe this is that I thought it was weird that Alyssa is working that newspaper in RE7, like the local paper in Dulvey, Louisiana. And I'm wondering, is this the job? Like, is this one of the few jobs she was able to get because she's just been blacklisted or thrown out of so many jobs by the government putting pressure on her editors, or her editors, like, her trying to convince her editors about the truth of Raccoon City and just throwing her out because they're like, you know what, we are a respectable newspaper. We're not here to print conspiracy theorists. And I think that would be interesting. Like, could Grace have had resentment growing up under a mother who constantly forced them to move from town to town, from newspaper to newspaper, because she couldn't hold down stable work, because she was constantly trying to show the world that Raccoon City happened, and she never had a normal childhood because of that? I think that's something that we could potentially see play out here in Requiem, and sort of like a regret that Grace has at the fact that her mom died before they can make up. But that's about it, folks. I hope you liked what I talked about here, and until next time you hear me on the radio, have a good life, have a good day, and have a good night. See you soon, folks.